Hello guys, welcome to Clinical Medicine and we will discuss metabolic alkalosis in this video. So alkalosis means increase in the pH to more than 7.45 and it can be due to respiratory or due to metabolic causes. Whenever the rise in pH, increase in pH is because of increase in bicarb, it is called as metabolic alkalosis. So we understand that metabolic alkalosis is increase in pH due to increase in bicarb. So now how will the body compensate? The body will compensate by respiratory acidosis. There will be decrease in the respiratory rate, there will be hypoventilation and retention of CO2. How much? The compensation by the body is fixed. So for every increase in bicarb, the PCO2 will increase by 0.75. So that's the compensation. Metabolic alkalosis, it can occur by two mechanisms. Either there can be increase in bicarb due to gain of bicarb, or there can be loss of acid, that is H plus molecule. Because H plus is acidic, loss of H plus will lead to increase in pH. Whenever one molecule of H plus is lost, there is effectively one molecule of bicarb that is added in the circulation. So loss of H plus means that there is increase of bicarb in the circulation. This can be explained by the formula. By this formula. So whenever this goes down, there is less of H plus to bind with bicarb and then the bicarb increases. Now there are two phases of metabolic alkalosis. First is the generation phase where there is loss of acid. So suppose patient comes with vomiting and he has lost H plus in the gastric secretions. So effectively bicarb will increase in the circulation. Now if the vomiting recovers, this bicarb should be excreted by the kidneys, right? And the body should come back to the normal state. But this is not excreted by the kidneys and the body continues to be in a state of metabolic alkalosis. That is called as the second phase, the maintenance phase. And why do the kidneys fail to excrete the extra bicarb from the body? There are three reasons for it: volume deficiency, chloride deficiency and hypokalemia. We will see how they lead to a maintenance of metabolic alkalosis. Now let's learn how chloride deficiency leads to maintenance of metabolic alkalosis. How chloride deficiency delays recovery of the body from metabolic alkalosis. So there is increase in the bicarb and the kidneys need to increase excretion of bicarb, right? To recover from alkalosis, the kidney needs to excrete the extra bicarb that is there in the circulation. But if we look here, there is a chloride bicarb exchanger. So in order to excrete one molecule of bicarb, the kidney should reabsorb one molecule of chloride. And if there is chloride deficiency, for example, if the chloride is lost in gastric secretions, there will be less chloride delivered to the distal tubule. So now because the chloride here is decreased, there is decreased absorption of chloride and that's why there is decreased excretion of bicarb. That's how decrease in chloride leads to metabolic alkalosis. There are multiple ways by which hypokalemia can lead to metabolic alkalosis. So whenever there is decrease in the potassium concentration outside the cell, potassium from inside the cell moves outside. But now the cell has lost one positive cation. So to maintain neutrality, H plus will move inside and this will lead to intracellular acidosis. So what happens because of this? There is increase in the bicarbonate reabsorption in the collecting duct. Actually the kidneys had to lose bicarb. It had to lose bicarb, but on the contrary, the reabsorption of bicarb increases because of hypokalemia. Secondarily, hypokalemia leads to increase in ammonia genesis. There is increased ammonia formation and this ammonia combines with H plus and it is secreted as ammonium ions into the urine. So what happens now? Again H plus is lost, and when H plus is lost, there is addition of bicarb in the circulation. So effectively bicarb is increasing. So these are the two ways. Now another way how hypokalemia can lead to metabolic alkalosis, whenever there is decrease in potassium, let's look at this alpha intercalated cells. here there is a channel H plus K plus exchanger. So potassium is absorbed for 1 molecule of H plus excreted. So whenever there is hypokalemia, there is increase in the absorption of potassium, and that's why there is increase in the simultaneously increase in the excretion of H plus. And we know 1 H plus lost is 1 bicarb added in the circulation. So that's how bicarb increases in presence of hypokalemia, and that's how metabolic alkalosis occurs. Here again in the beta intercalated cells we see that the bicarb is getting excreted in exchange of chloride. So whenever there is chloride deficiency, this exchanger will not work and bicarb will not be excreted, so metabolic alkalosis will persist. So we have understood how hypokalemia and decrease in chloride concentration can lead to maintenance of metabolic alkalosis. The third point was volume deficiency. So whenever there is vomiting or whenever there is volume deficiency, there is increase in the aldosterone, and that leads to persistence of metabolic alkalosis. Let's see the mechanism. But before that, let's see how diuretics cause metabolic alkalosis. So suppose this is furosemide, and we know that furosemide leads to block in the absorption of sodium, potassium and 2-chloride channel in the loop of Henle. So what will happen? Sodium, potassium and chloride, they will reach in the distal tubular cell, and here there is a sodium hydrogen exchanger. So whenever there is increase in the sodium concentration here, because the sodium did not get absorbed here, the concentration, the distal concentration of sodium will increase, and there will be increased absorption of sodium over here. So effectively what will happen? There will be increased excretion of H plus, and we know that H plus lost is bicarb gained in the circulation. So diuretics will lead to metabolic alkalosis. Also, if you see here, potassium is getting lost, so potassium decreases, and we know when potassium decreases, hypokalemia leads to metabolic alkalosis. So this is the second way how diuretics can lead to metabolic alkalosis. Now, how does aldosterone cause hypokalemia and metabolic alkalosis? Aldosterone, it acts on the principal cell in the cortical collecting duct, and at which channel? The ENaC channel. So whenever there is stimulation by aldosterone, there is increase in the absorption of sodium through the ENaC channel, and this leads to development of a negative potential inside the lumen. Now, to maintain neutrality, potassium and H plus ions are excreted inside the lumen. So whenever there is increase in aldosterone activity, there is increased absorption of sodium inside the body, that leads to increase in BP, expansion of extracellular volume, extracellular fluid, and to compensate for the negative lumen potential, potassium and hydrogen ions are excreted in increased amounts. So that leads to hypokalemia, and we know H plus lost is bicarb gained in the circulation. So hypokalemia and increased bicarb in the circulation, and we know both of this leads to metabolic alkalosis. So that's how hyperaldosteronism can lead to metabolic alkalosis. Now, causes of metabolic alkalosis have been divided on the basis of urine chloride concentration and whether the patient is hypertensive or whether the patient has normal BP. On the basis of that, the metabolic alkalosis have been divided. But before we proceed to understand the classification, let's understand a simple concept. Whenever there is extra renal loss, for example in chloride losing diarrhea, or if the patient has vomiting, or if the patient has nasogastric suctioning, when there is extra renal loss of H plus or chloride or sodium or water, what will the kidneys do? There will be increase in the reabsorption in the nephrons as compensation. So whenever there is vomiting gastric lavage, chloride losing diarrhea, the three common conditions. So whenever we have these three common conditions where the loss of H plus and chloride is extrarenal, the renal tubules increase the absorption of chloride, and that's why the urine chloride concentration is less than 10 milliequivalents. Whereas when the loss is renal, obviously the urine chloride will be increased because the loss is occurring at the renal level. So how will the compensation occur? So that's a easier way of remembering it. And if we look at the high urine chloride causes, it has again been divided into hypertensive and normotensive. So first let's look at diuretics. We know diuretics, by inhibiting the sodium potassium 2 chloride channel, lead to increase in the sodium potassium and chloride concentration in the urine. Bartter syndrome is a genetic gene mutation in the same gene where the inhibition in sodium potassium and 2 chloride absorption through the channel is inhibited because of gene mutation, not because of any drug. Severe potassium deficiency and Gitelman syndrome. Gitelman syndrome is mutation in the gene encoding for sodium chloride absorption in the distal tubule, in the DCT. This is in the loop of Henle. So these patients will have normotension. Why? Because sodium is getting lost in the urine. So this will be associated with low BP. The extracellular fluid volume will be normal. They will only have increase in the chloride content in the urine. Whereas there are some causes which are associated with hypertension, particularly causes which are related to increase in the aldosterone. We know that aldosterone increases sodium absorption through the ENaC channels. So whenever there is high aldosterone, there will be increase in the sodium, and that will lead to increase in BP. Now the causes of high aldosterone have been divided into two depending on the renin. We know that when the renin is low, that means there is autonomous production of aldosterone due to primary hyperaldosteronism. That could be secondary to adenoma or hyperplasia. Whereas when the renin is high, we know that there is a secondary cause for hyperaldosteronism. Probably renovascular, probably some renin secreting tumor or malignant hypertension. Sometimes there can be hypertension, but the aldosterone can be low and the renin can be low. This can occur in situations with glycerinic acid, carbenoxolone, Liddle syndrome, and apparent mineralocorticoid excess. So glycerinic acid and carbenoxolone, they inhibit the enzyme 11-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. So this enzyme is responsible for degrading the aldosterone. So when this enzyme is inhibited, aldosterone increases. This situation is also called as apparent mineralocorticoid excess, because the increase in aldosterone is actually not real. Another important cause is Liddle syndrome. Liddle syndrome is basically, it is constitutive activation of ENaC channel in the absence of aldosterone. There is no increased aldosterone in the body. It is because of genetic mutation that the ENaC channel is constitutively active, and that is called as Liddle syndrome. So in such case also there will be low aldosterone, low renin, but there will be hypertension. So that's how the classification of metabolic alkalosis is. But most of the time all we need to make a diagnosis is history and assessment of extracellular fluid volume and BP. By these three things we can tell what could be the cause of metabolic alkalosis. So we have learned that metabolic alkalosis can be classified as chloride responsive and chloride resistant. We have also learned that extrarenal causes lead to chloride responsive metabolic alkalosis, that is urine chloride less than 10 milliequivalent. We have also learned that renal causes usually lead to chloride resistant metabolic alkalosis, that is urine chloride more than 10. Here we have learned mineralocorticoid, primary or secondary cortisol excess, Bartter and Gitelman, Liddle syndrome, potassium depletion, diuretic use, and milk alkali syndrome. So the more important ones are the first 6. So if we see, diuretic is coming here also and here also. So initially when we are giving diuretic, when we start the patient on diuretic, it leads to increase in the chloride excretion in the urine. So the urine chloride concentration will be more than 10. But with time, the chloride stores in the body deplete. So ultimately what will happen? There will be fall in the chloride concentration in the urine. So post diuretic phase, urine chloride will be decreased. What is this post hypercapnia? So COPD patients, we know that they retain carbon dioxide because they have hypoventilation, right? So whenever there is hypoventilation and carbon dioxide retention, that leads to respiratory acidosis. And in response to respiratory acidosis, what will be the body produce as compensatory mechanism? It will be metabolic alkalosis. But when the patient recovers from respiratory acidosis, the PCO2 comes back to normal, but the increase in bicarb that occurred due to respiratory acidosis, it takes time to recover. So that is called as the post hypercapnia metabolic alkalosis. The increase in the bicarb concentration, it takes time to come back to normal. So in this phase also, this is also extrarenal, so the chloride will be less in the urine. This will be chloride responsive. So let's begin with clinical case discussion. But before we start to solve questions, let's know that the normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45, right? And for solving cases, we use 7.4 as the average. Similarly, bicarb concentration is normally 22 to 26, and for solving cases, we take 24. PCO2, the range is 35 to 45, although we take an average of 40 to solve our questions. So now, here is a patient who is a chronic smoker on regular nebulizer therapy and comes with complaint of multiple episodes of vomiting. The ABG is showing pH of 7.42. So pH is 7.42. pH is normal. So does that rule out metabolic or respiratory any acid-base disorder? No. A normal pH does not rule out acid-base disorder. So what is the next step? Always look at bicarb and CO2 concentration. What is the bicarb? 42. And what is the PCO2? 67. So they both are increased. So definitely there is some problem here. Now we take 7.4 as the average pH. So what is the given pH? Although it is in the normal range, it is going slightly towards the higher range, slightly towards alkalosis, right? And what is bicarb here? Bicarb here is increased. So whenever there is increase in pH due to increase in bicarb, what do we call this? We call this alkalosis as metabolic alkalosis. So okay, we understand that yes, patient has came with complaint of vomiting, so patient might have metabolic alkalosis, right? But patient also seems to be a case of COPD because he is chronic smoker on beta 2 inhalers. So he also seems to be a case of COPD. Anyways, what will be our next step? we will have to calculate the compensation. And what is the formula? We know for increase in 1 molecule of bicarb, the PCO2 will increase by 0.75 millimeter mercury. We know that how much has our bicarb increased. So our bicarb has increased from 24 to 42. So that's an increase of 18 milliequivalent. So now let's multiply this by 0.75. Multiply this by directly 0.7. So 18 into 0.7, that will give us 12.6. So how much should our PCO2 increase? Our PCO2 should increase by 12.6. So what is the normal PCO2 that we take for calculation? 40. So it should have become 52.6. But our PCO2 is actually 67. So it's quite high than expected. So in such a case, we suspect that there is a mixed acid-base disorder. Whenever there is more than or less than the expected compensation, we suspect mixed acid-base disorder. So what is happening here? The PCO2 was supposed to be 52, but actually it's 67. So that means that the lungs is retaining more carbon dioxide than it is supposed to, right? It was supposed to just have 52 PCO2, but it is having 67 PCO2. So there is increase in the PCO2 more than expected. So this will lead to respiratory acidosis, because we know increase in PCO2 will lead to decrease in pH. So this will be acidosis secondary to respiratory. So the patient here is having dual component. Is having metabolic alkalosis secondary to vomiting plus respiratory acidosis due to chronic smoking, due to COPD that he has. And because of alkalosis and acidosis, the pH actually is nearer to normal, only slightly raised. So yeah, let's move on to next question. A 22-year-old patient came with complaint of headache, blurring of vision, history of recurrent pedal edema. On examination, BP is 180 by 120. His investigations reveal. So a young patient has come with hypertension. So this is a case of secondary hypertension, right? Primary hypertension is hypertension in elderlies. When young patient present with hypertension, we have to rule out secondary causes. So this patient is a case of secondary hypertension. He has presented with accelerated hypertension, right? By blurring of vision and headache. So history of malignant hypertension is present. And now his investigations, what does it reveal? Look at the pH. pH is raised, 7.5. Look at the bicarb. Bicarb is also raised. So this alkalosis is metabolic alkalosis. Now what about the compensation? So how much is the bicarb raised? From 29 it has gone to 34. The bicarb has raised by 10. Now we know that the PCO2, for one increase in bicarb, PCO2 will increase by 0.7. So here PCO2 should increase by 7. So how much should be our expected PCO2? Around 47, right? But how much is the given PCO2? It's 49. So plus or minus 2 is allowed. So 49, so it's okay. So this is compensated metabolic alkalosis. So if we look at the potassium is 2.3. And look here, the additional clues that are given. The renin is high. So whenever the renin is high, we know that it is a secondary hyperaldosteronism. What are the causes of secondary hyperaldosteronism? 3 causes we learned. One was the malignant hypertension. second was the renin secreting tumor, and the third was renal artery stenosis. And we hear a bruit in the renal angle, so that goes with our renal artery stenosis as the answer. So that's how we approach this case. And moving on to the next, here let's take a 2-year-old boy has presented, his mother has presented with complaint of frequency of urine and increased thirst. So here there is polyuria, polydipsia, and during her pregnancy she says that she had polyhydramnios. So that is a significant antenatal history. And what does the investigation reveal? The investigation reveals alkalosis, and bicarb is increased from 24 to 30, so it has increased by 6. So this is metabolic alkalosis. And what should be our compensation? 6 into 0.7, so almost 4.2. So our expected PCO2 is 40 plus 4.2, that is equal to around 44. What is the PCO2 given? 46. So okay, we can allow plus or minus 2 fluctuation. So this is compensated metabolic alkalosis, right? And urine chloride is 50. It's more than 10. So what kind of metabolic alkalosis this is? This is chloride resistant alkalosis in a patient who is 2-year-old boy. So here what should we suspect? Here we should suspect Bartter syndrome. This is due to genetic mutation in sodium potassium 2 chloride channel that leads to loss of sodium and potassium and chloride in the urine. That's why the urine chloride is so much raised. Because of loss of sodium, there will be dehydration. So these patients will have increased thirst. And because sodium is getting lost, water will get lost along with it, and there will be polyuria. And because of polyuria in the antenatal period, this fetal polyuria manifests as maternal polyhydramnios. So yeah, this brings us to the end of our discussion on metabolic alkalosis. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so that I keep making more such videos. And see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.